I thought my life was solid. Maybe not extraordinary, but solid. My wife, Emma, and I had built what I thought was a decent marriage over 7 years. We had our routines, our shared stories, and our shared plans. It wasn't perfect, but it felt enough for me. I never imagined that my world would come crashing down on such a quiet Tuesday evening. Emma and I met when I was 25, and we clicked from the start. She was the type of person who could light up any room with her smile, and she was quick to laugh, quick to care. We met at a mutual friends party, and from the first conversation, we just fit. She made me feel like the luckiest guy alive. We dated for a year before she moved in, and I proposed a year after that. I remember the night I proposed. It felt surreal, as if I was writing the beginning of a new chapter of my life. We didn't waste any time with a long engagement. We were married within 6 months, full of excitement for what the future held. Over the years, life settled into a rhythm. We both worked hard, went on a couple of trips every year, and spent lazy Sundays watching movies together. I thought we were in it for the long haul. But slowly little things started to feel off. Emma's phone was always by her side, and her laughter, once so frequent around me, seemed to be reserved for someone else. Her late-night texting sessions started to become routine, and she brushed it off with a casual, just catching up with an old friend, when I asked. I wasn't the jealous type, and I didn't want to make a big deal out of nothing. After all, I trusted her. But things didn't improve. Emma started spending more time away from home, and her girls' nights became more frequent. Our conversations grew shorter, and even when we were together, it felt like there was this invisible wall between us. I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking things, that she was just going through a phase, or maybe work was stressing her out. But that nagging feeling that something wasn't right wouldn't go away. One night, after she had gone to bed, I noticed her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. It was a text. Nothing particularly suspicious, just a notification. But the notification displayed no name, just a number, like it had been manually entered. My curiosity got the better of me, and I stared at the screen, wondering if I should just let it go, or if this was the confirmation of my suspicions. That was the moment I felt something in me shift. I realized that I couldn't just sit by, letting my doubts eat away at me. But I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. First, I needed proof. I wasn't going to accuse her based on a feeling alone. And that was how I found myself there, standing in our darkened kitchen, the screen of her phone illuminating my face as I tried to steel myself for what I might find. The next morning, I could barely focus. The anxiety gnawed at me like an itch I couldn't scratch. Emma acted as if nothing was wrong, just like she always did, which somehow made it worse. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I made my first move. I got up, took her phone from her nightstand, and went to the living room, hands shaking. Unlocking it was surprisingly easy. I'd watched her enter the password 100 times, but as soon as I opened her messages, my stomach sank. There it was, a string of messages from a contact listed as work that were far too intimate to be professional. They weren't explicit, but the tone, the flirting, and the inside jokes, all directed towards someone other than me, were unmistakable. I scrolled up to the beginning of the conversation. The texts went back months. I read through each one, feeling myself unravel as I went. She'd been talking to this man, a coworker I'd heard her mention in passing a few times, as if he were just another face at her office. But clearly, he was more than that. He was everything to her, or so it seemed from these texts. Then came the part that shattered any last remnants of denial I was holding on to. There it was, a message from Emma suggesting they meet up at a hotel. No details, no specific talk of what went on, but she didn't have to spell it out. I knew. I could feel the betrayal deep in my bones. I sat there for hours, staring blankly at the screen, feeling every single emotion course through me. Shock, anger, heartbreak. I was holding undeniable proof, and yet, I felt paralyzed. All those little red flags, all the excuses she'd fed me, were confirmed in a single message. It was like the ground I stood on had been stripped away, leaving me in free fall. Finally, I closed her phone, placed it back on her nightstand, and crawled into bed next to her. She looked so peaceful, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I lay there in the dark, feeling the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. My mind kept spinning with questions, but one in particular wouldn't leave me alone. Why? Why would she risk everything we had for this? For him? The next day, I went through the motions at work, a ghost of myself, playing the part of the oblivious husband while I strategized my next move. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed to know just how deep this affair went, how many lies I'd been fed. I decided I would gather as much evidence as I could before confronting her. In the days that followed, I became a stranger in my own life. I had to keep up the facade that everything was fine, but inside, I was coming undone. Every time Emma smiled at me, every time she kissed my cheek or made some lighthearted comment, I felt myself stiffen. My trust in her, once unwavering, was now hanging by a thread. But I couldn't confront her, not until I was absolutely certain I had everything. So, I did what I never imagined I'd do. I began to investigate my own wife. I started small, checking her phone whenever she left it unattended, skimming her texts and email. There were coded exchanges with her coworker, arrangements to meet up, vague references to catching up or grabbing drinks after work. Each message, even the seemingly harmless ones, made me feel as if I were digging my own grave. Then, I found her second phone. She'd left it in her gym bag, assuming I'd never look there. I couldn't believe it at first, that she had a whole device dedicated to this secret life. On that phone, there was no ambiguity. It was filled with messages that were raw and unfiltered. She'd been meeting this man in hotel rooms, taking afternoons off under the pretense of appointments, weekends at girls' trips. All the pieces of her elaborate deception fell into place with every message I read. Worst of all were the pictures and videos. I don't know what possessed me to open them, but I did. She was laughing, smiling in ways I hadn't seen in years. Seeing her that way, radiant, free, shook me to my core. This was the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd built a life with, and yet here she was, giving all of herself to someone else. I hit rock bottom that night. I took everything I'd found, the messages, photos, the screenshots I'd saved onto a thumb drive, and locked myself in my office. I stared at that pile of evidence until the sun came up, feeling like I'd just uncovered my worst nightmare. What hit me the hardest was realizing that she hadn't just been lying to me. She'd been lying to herself, too. I could see it in her messages, in the way she justified things to him, excusing her behavior as if it were something beyond her control. She spoke of being trapped in a marriage that didn't satisfy her, that she needed more, as if she hadn't spent the last 7 years building this life with me. I decided then that there was no coming back from this. I would confront her, but it wouldn't be an impulsive, heated argument. I would confront her on my terms, with every piece of evidence I'd gathered, so that there'd be no room for denial, no way for her to twist the truth. After that sleepless night, something in me shifted. The devastation began to morph into a strange calm. I knew that I couldn't live with her lies anymore. But this wasn't just about calling her out or venting my anger. It was about ending things with dignity, about making sure she knew the full weight of her betrayal. I spent the next few days putting my plan together. I knew Emma. I knew how she'd try to squirm out of this, to gaslight, to minimize, to make me feel like I was overreacting. I wasn't about to let that happen. She'd chosen her path, and it was time she faced the consequences. I thought about our relationship and the vows we'd made, wondering how she could possibly justify what she'd done. Those vows were supposed to mean something, but clearly, she lost sight of them somewhere along the way. I didn't know this woman in those texts and videos. I didn't know this version of her who could turn her back on everything we'd built. In preparation, I called a lawyer, seeking legal advice on how to approach a separation with as little damage to myself as possible. I wasn't looking to punish her, but I wanted to protect what was left of my life. The lawyer was calm and pragmatic, giving me clear instructions on documenting everything. The more evidence you have, the better your position, he said, his voice dispassionate, as if he were giving weather advice. After the call, I decided to gather every last bit of proof I could. I spent hours going through her messages, printing out pages of texts, screenshots, and emails. I knew that this confrontation had to be airtight, that she couldn't be given a single inch to explain away what she'd done. The thought of confronting her filled me with a strange mix of dread and anticipation. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to let out all the hurt and betrayal that had been festering inside me. But I knew that an explosive confrontation wouldn't solve anything. It would just give her ammunition to play the victim, to say I was being too emotional, unreasonable. I decided that I would confront her when she least expected it, somewhere neutral where she couldn't escape the conversation. I had everything planned out in my head. I would take her out to dinner, put her in a setting where she felt comfortable and relaxed, and then I would lay it all out. I wanted her to feel the shock I'd felt, to be blindsided in the same way I had been. I wanted her to look at me and realize that I knew, that I had seen everything. As the day approached, I felt a strange sense of peace. I was past the shock, past the anger, and standing firmly in resolve. I'd reached a place where I no longer needed her explanations or excuses. The evidence spoke for itself, and I didn't need her to justify her actions. I just wanted her to know that I knew, that I'd been betrayed in the deepest way possible, and that there would be no coming back from this. The night before, I sat in our home office, staring at that stack of evidence one last time. I took a deep breath, knowing that by this time tomorrow, everything would be different. I wasn't sure how she'd react, but I knew that I was finally ready. This was the end, and I would face it with as much strength as I could muster. The day finally came, and with it, a quiet resolve. My nerves had transformed from raw panic into a steely calm that felt like the eye of a storm. I went about my day with a strange sense of detachment, almost like an outsider watching my own life. Emma greeted me with her usual smile, oblivious to what was coming. She asked if I wanted to go out for dinner that evening, and I agreed. The irony of it wasn't lost on me. She was planning a nice evening out with me, her husband, completely unaware that this night would change everything. We got to the restaurant around 7 p.m., a cozy Italian place that we'd been to many times before. She loved this place. It was the kind of setting where she felt at ease. The irony was thick, the idea that we'd sit down to dinner here as if everything were normal, when everything was about to be anything but. I watched her across the table as she chatted about her day, a subtle glow on her face. Part of me wanted to reach out and stop her, to say, "Don't do this. Don't act like everything is fine. It's not." As we waited for our meals, I took a deep breath. This was it. I'd rehearsed this moment in my mind a dozen times, but now, sitting across from her, it felt more surreal than I'd imagined. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. She looked at it, then back at me, her expression shifting from confusion to concern. "Emma," I began, my voice steady but cold, "I think there's something we need to discuss." Her face paled slightly, her smile fading as she sensed the seriousness in my tone. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice a shade quieter. I placed the folder on the table, pushing it gently toward her. "I want you to open this," I said, watching her closely. She hesitated, looking at me as if searching for some sign of what was inside. Slowly, she reached for the folder, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened it. The first thing she saw was the printout of her messages with him, the man she'd been hiding in the shadows of our life. I watched as her eyes moved across the page, her expression going from confusion to horror. "What, how?" Her voice broke, and she looked up at me, wide-eyed, like a deer caught in headlights. "How did you?" "I know everything, Emma," I interrupted, my voice as calm as it could be. "I know about the texts, the hotel meetups, the second phone. I know all of it." She sat frozen, her hands gripping the folder as if it were her only anchor. "I can explain," she stammered, but I could see the panic rising in her eyes. "There's nothing to explain," I said, my voice firm. "You made your choice, Emma. You betrayed me, our marriage, everything we built together. And there's no excuse, no explanation that can undo what you've done." She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, stopping her. "I didn't bring you here for explanations," I said, my voice hardening. "I brought you here so that you would know, so that there's no room for denial or excuses. I wanted you to feel the weight of what you've done, because this—" I gestured to the folder. "This is the end." Emma sat there, stunned, her eyes darting from the folder to me, as if looking for an escape route that didn't exist. For a moment, the restaurant around us felt like it faded away, the sounds of clinking silverware and muted conversation dissolving into the background. I'd imagined this confrontation, had rehearsed what I'd say, but I never anticipated what it would be like to watch her come to terms with the fact that her lies were unraveling in front of her. Her hands fell away from the folder, dropping to her lap, and she let out a shaky breath. I don't know what to say, she whispered, barely audible. That's a first, I replied, the bitterness in my voice sharper than I intended. But this isn't about what you can say to fix this, because there is no fixing this, Emma. Her eyes filled with tears as she tried to reach across the table toward me. Please, please, can we just… I don't even know how this happened. I didn't mean for it to. Didn't mean for it to happen? I snapped, my calm facade finally cracking. You didn't mean to plan all those nights away? You didn't mean to have another phone? You didn't mean to meet him at hotels, to lie to my face every single day? I could feel my voice rising, and I struggled to contain it, not wanting to create a scene. But it felt like the anger was pouring out of me, years of trust crumbling with every word. Please, she pleaded, her voice trembling. Just give me a chance to explain. I was confused. I was going through so much. I wasn't myself. I shook my head, disgusted. I don't want excuses, Emma. You can sit there and tell me you were confused or going through something, but at the end of the day, you made choice after choice. You chose him. You chose to betray us. Her face contorted in anguish, and the tears finally broke free, streaming down her cheeks. For a second, watching her break down, I felt a pang of guilt. The woman across from me had once been everything to me, my closest confidant, my partner. But those memories felt like someone else's life, like they belonged to another version of us that no longer existed. Do you even love him? I asked, almost against my own will, not sure I wanted the answer. She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. No, it was never about that. He was just someone I could escape with. I don't love him, I swear. Her words only deepened the wound. Then why, Emma? Why risk everything? Why ruin everything if he didn't even mean anything to you? She shook her head, wiping at her eyes, clearly struggling to find an answer that made sense. I don't know, she whispered, her voice breaking. I was lost, and he was there. I know that doesn't excuse anything, but I swear, I never stopped loving you. I lost myself somewhere along the way. I sat back, feeling an odd emptiness where my anger had been. Maybe you did lose yourself, I replied quietly, but in the process, you lost me too. For a long moment, we sat in silence. She cried softly, her shoulders shaking, while I just sat there, drained. I realized I had no more words left to say. I'd said everything, felt everything, and now, all that was left was the hollow reality that our marriage was over. After a long, painful silence, I stood up. Emma looked up at me, eyes wide and red from crying, her expression pleading, desperate. I could see a part of her wanting to pull me back down, wanting to talk more, to bargain, to say something that could rewind the past few months and erase what she'd done. But I was done with words. I felt like I'd spent years talking, years trusting, and now, finally, I had nothing left to say. I took one last look at her, feeling the weight of every good memory, every moment we'd shared. I don't think there's anything else to discuss, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll be in touch about next steps, but I think we both know there's no coming back from this. Please, she said, her voice breaking, please, just let me try to make this right. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't give up on us. I shook my head, my jaw clenched. I didn't give up on us, Emma. You did. You made choices that brought us here, and now you have to live with them. Leaving her sitting there, alone and defeated, I walked out of the restaurant. Each step away from her felt like tearing away a piece of myself, but it was a pain I knew I had to endure. This was the woman I'd loved, and yet I couldn't recognize her anymore. She had become a stranger, and any hope I'd once had of reconciliation had been shattered the moment I'd opened that folder. There was no going back. The cool night air hit me as I stepped outside, shocking me back to reality. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange mixture of relief and despair. I knew the worst was behind me, but the future felt hollow. All the plans we'd made, all the dreams we'd built together, were now just memories, buried under the weight of betrayal. As I drove home alone, I tried to imagine what life would look like without her. I would have to sell the house, the one we'd put so much effort into making our own. I'd have to divide everything, our shared belongings, the photos, the little reminders of the life we'd built together. It was as if I was dismantling not just a marriage, but an entire chapter of my life. That night, I slept in the guest room. I couldn't bring myself to lie in the bed we'd shared, to be surrounded by the ghosts of what we used to have. Lying awake in the dark, I realized how alone I truly felt. The silence was deafening, as if even the walls around me were mourning the life I'd lost. The next morning, Emma was waiting for me in the kitchen, her eyes swollen, a cup of coffee untouched on the counter. "I know you don't want to talk to me right now," she said softly, "but I need you to know that I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry." I looked at her, feeling nothing but exhaustion. "I believe you," I replied, "but sorry doesn't change anything. It doesn't undo the lies, the betrayal, and it doesn't make this pain go away." She took a shaky breath, wiping at her eyes. "I know. I just wish I could take it all back." "So do I," I replied, feeling the finality of those words sink in. There was no fixing this. She could apologize 1,000 times, but it wouldn't change the reality that she destroyed something sacred. This was the end, and we both knew it. Without another word, I left the kitchen, feeling the weight of the decision settle heavily on my shoulders. This was it. I was done. And despite the heartbreak, a strange sense of peace washed over me, like I was finally letting go of a burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. For the next few days, Emma and I barely spoke. We moved around the house like ghosts, keeping to separate rooms, as if we were just two strangers sharing a space. Each time I crossed paths with her, there was a heaviness in the air, an unspoken sadness. I could feel her watching me, hoping I'd change my mind, but I didn't. My decision was firm. I was done. Finally, I knew it was time to let people know. The hardest part was telling my family. They had always liked Emma, treated her like part of the family, and never once suspected she would be capable of something like this. I called my mother first, my stomach twisting as I tried to find the right words. She answered, cheerful as ever, and hearing her voice only made it harder. "Mom," I said, taking a deep breath, "I have something difficult to tell you." Immediately, her tone changed, shifting to concern. "Is everything all right? What's going on?" I swallowed, my throat tight. "Emma and I, we're separating. She's been unfaithful. I just found out, and there's no way to fix it." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, softly, she said, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." Her voice cracked, and I could hear the pain and sympathy there, and it nearly broke me. She knew how much Emma had meant to me, how much I'd put into our relationship. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling the weight of it settle on me. "I feel like everything I knew, everything I believed, just shattered. But I'll get through it. I have to." We talked a while longer, and I felt some of the heaviness lift just by sharing it with someone who cared. My mother reassured me, promised to be there however I needed, and reminded me that I wasn't alone. I hung up, feeling both exhausted and slightly relieved, but I knew there was still more to face. Next, I told a few close friends, people who had been with me through thick and thin. The responses varied from shock to anger on my behalf, but they all shared a common thread: support. Every person I told felt like peeling back another layer of the pain, exposing it to the light, making it real. I felt vulnerable but supported, and slowly, it began to sink in that I didn't have to carry this burden alone. But telling people wasn't enough to make the reality easier. At night, the silence of the house pressed down on me, and memories of Emma and me would play unbidden in my mind. The vacations we'd taken, the first apartment we'd shared, the late-night talks where we'd shared our hopes and dreams. Those memories felt like ghosts now, haunting me with visions of what could never be again. Emma knew I was telling people. She didn't ask questions, just watched me with that same look of remorse and regret. She stayed quiet, almost as if respecting my need to process this on my own. I could tell she wanted to apologize again, but I'd already told her apologies didn't matter. They didn't fix the damage or heal the wounds. As the days went on, I noticed small changes in myself. There was a new strength there, something fierce and unyielding that I hadn't felt before. I was in pain, yes, but each day it was a little more bearable, like the wound was starting to scab over. I realized that this was my life now. This was my new reality, and it was up to me to decide what came next. And what came next, I knew, was letting go of the life I'd once known. Letting go of Emma, the woman I'd loved, the woman I thought I'd grow old with. It was time to start over, to rebuild, piece by piece, until I could stand on my own again. As the days turned into weeks, my initial heartbreak began to give way to acceptance. I knew the only way forward was to finalize the separation and truly let go. I gathered my evidence, the messages, photos, and videos, knowing that I'd likely need them to protect myself in court. Emma had no idea I'd gathered this much information, but I wasn't interested in using it to humiliate her, only to protect myself and to expedite the process. One afternoon, I met with my lawyer, a firm handshake grounding me as I sat across from him. He was a straightforward, practical man who understood the raw nature of betrayal. "You have a strong case for a fair division of assets, given the circumstances," he assured me. His words felt like both a relief and a reminder of just how shattered everything had become. After going over the details, I signed the papers, feeling a finality in the act. There it was, our marriage, reduced to a stack of legal documents. The divorce would take a few months to finalize, but the hardest part was done. I walked out of the office with a bittersweet mixture of grief and relief, feeling as though I'd taken the first real step toward a life free from lies. That evening, Emma approached me for what I knew would be one of our last conversations before she moved out. She looked hesitant, her eyes filled with regret and a glimmer of hope. "I know I've said this before," she began softly, "but I truly am sorry. I wish I could go back and undo everything. I know that doesn't fix it, but I just wanted you to know." I nodded, acknowledging her words, but I felt an odd sense of detachment. "I believe you're sorry, Emma. I do. But that doesn't change what you did. We can't go back. You made choices that ended us, and I'm learning to accept that." She took a shaky breath, wiping away tears. "Is there really no chance? No way to fix this?" I looked at her, feeling a deep sorrow but also a strange peace. "I don't think there is. I've let go, and maybe you need to do the same." She nodded, defeated, and turned away. And with that, I knew the last door had closed. A month later, Emma moved out, taking only what was agreed upon, leaving our home feeling emptier than I'd ever imagined. Seeing the bare walls, the empty shelves, was both freeing and painful. Each room a reminder of the life we'd shared and the life that was now just a memory. I spent that first weekend alone, sorting through what was left, deciding what to keep and what to let go. Each item felt like a piece of the past I was finally ready to release. Gradually, I began to replace the memories of us with new things, decorating in a way that felt like mine. Friends came over to help me redecorate, adding laughter and warmth to the space again. My home was slowly becoming my own, a symbol of a fresh start. As the weeks passed, I found solace in a new routine. I threw myself into work, spent more time with friends, and picked up old hobbies I'd let slip away during my marriage. I began to go to the gym more regularly, finding that the physical exertion helped release some of the emotional weight I'd been carrying. I felt stronger each day, both physically and mentally, and I realized that I was rediscovering parts of myself that I'd lost. But it wasn't just about distraction. It was about building a life that felt fulfilling on my own. I learned to enjoy my own company, to embrace the quiet moments in my now empty home, finding peace in the solitude. I was no longer defined by my relationship or my role as a husband. I was simply me. During this time, I reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen in years. Many had drifted away during my marriage, as Emma and I had become a bit isolated, wrapped up in our own lives. But now, I reached out, grateful for their companionship. We shared laughs over old memories and stories, and I found that there was a whole world outside of my marriage that I had almost forgotten. I was surprised by how supportive everyone was, how willing they were to rally around me during this time. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for these friendships and the realization that, despite everything, I wasn't alone. One day, while going through some old photos, I felt an unexpected shift within me. Instead of anger or sadness, I felt a glimmer of forgiveness, not for Emma, but for myself. I forgave myself for not seeing the signs earlier, for trusting too easily, for loving someone who would eventually hurt me. It was a hard-earned forgiveness, but it allowed me to let go of any lingering bitterness. I realized that I didn't want to carry resentment into my future. I wanted to be free, truly free, of this chapter. Forgiving Emma would take longer, but even that process had begun, slowly and quietly. I didn't need to forget, but I could let go, refusing to let the betrayal define me. Months later, as the divorce finalized, I felt a sense of closure. The paperwork arrived in the mail, marking the official end of our marriage. It was both a solemn moment and a liberating one. I stood there, looking at the papers, and realized that I was ready to leave the past behind. With the divorce final, I felt a surge of optimism I hadn't felt in years. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I knew I was stronger, wiser, and more resilient than before. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up, and while there would always be scars, I knew I would be okay. In time, maybe I'd find love again. But for now, I was content with just being me, living a life that was fully my own. I had survived betrayal and heartbreak, and in the process, I discovered a strength within myself that I never knew existed. I was free, free to move forward, free to rebuild, free to hope again. And that, I realized, was the beginning of a brand new chapter.